Hotep, peace, love, greetings, all that good stuff. Before I get to today's subject matter, it's a couple quick announcements. I will be doing a class in Miami Gardens on Saturday, December 23rd at 7 p.m. That'll be in Miami Gardens. If you would like information on that flyer, I'm about to get the email. We'll send that information over to you. Again, our next upcoming major group ritual event will be on Saturday, June 27th. That information and flyer will be coming out shortly. If you are also interested in a consultation, a spiritual consultation, again, so you don't have to email me and ask me how that works. Basically how it works, it lasts up until an hour or till we're finished, whichever one comes first, the hour or us finishing. I do charge $52 to do it, and it can be paid by either PayPal or Square. The consultation pretty much is dictated by you. Whatever you want to focus on in that consultation, we can focus on. Some people use it as a question and answer dialogue. Some people want to know specific information about ancestral spirits that they're working with. Some want to focus on particular areas of interest. Whatever you decide to do, that's entirely up to you. And whatever information, spirits, and archetypes come through in that consultation, I'll communicate that information to you. I do ask that you at least give me 24 to 48 hours, preferably at least 2 days prior notice if you want that consultation. So if you are interested, you can email me for a consultation and for the events that I just mentioned about a minute ago at khnum19@gmail.com. Again, that's khnum19@gmail.com. All right. I haven't gotten that out of it. What I kind of wanted to talk about today, kind of get into a little spiritual alchemy and how that's applied as an adept of the black arts or on the left-hand path in general. We're going to talk about the coagulated person. As we know, coagulation is an aspect that is synonymous with the Baphomet concept, because it represents transforming from one state of existence, be that mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and even sometimes physically, because when those things line up in order, they do affect the physical, into another state of existence. So it's about transformation, change, which coagulation is a very popular concept in alchemy. And again, the video that I did a little while back, maybe several weeks ago, stop talking and do the work and become a Baphomet. And what that basically means is, and we're gonna expound a little bit deeper on it in alchemical or alchemy terms, is that concept that Baphomet represents, that totality, okay, that equilibrium, okay, that balancing and merging of the masculine and feminine forces, because of the alchemical concept of what Baphomet represents. The masculine and feminine energy, as we talked about before, because he has the goat face of a man, he has the breast of a female. It represents androgyny. The four elements are represented in that Baphomet symbol: earth, wind, air, fire. Earth, wind, air, fire, and the water elements actually represented in there, the five elements. As above, so below, which is basically an alchemical principle to understand what we call the physical realm and what we call the spiritual realm, for a lack of a better word, is connected. There's no separation between the two. When an individual has the ability to make themselves less dense and vibrate at a higher frequency, they're able to tap in to those higher realms, or what we call spiritual realms. And as I've said before in the past, understand these spiritual realms, and people will liken it to they always try to depict it as if it's above. And the reason why the term as above, so below means they're actually interwoven around you. You're able to penetrate those realms or abodes when you're vibrating at a high frequency, and you're able to penetrate those abodes and make yourself less dense, meaning not weighed down by nonsensical shit that prevent you from growing spiritually. Your emotions, maybe habits that you're attached to that might be detrimental to your spiritual growth. All these things play a key factor in assisting in being able to make that connection with the spiritual realm. Now, coagulation and dealing with alchemy, we're going to talk about the coagulated person. Okay, we're going to start to show you the beginning stages are the most challenging, and I've said this before, when you make the intention to come on this path and make that direct change. So we're going to talk about how that process works, what one might experience and go through, some of the hardships you're going to deal with, and then of course how to try to overcome a lot of those hardships and deal with them. Because really this path, left-hand path, when you really understand and study alchemy, spiritual alchemy, mental alchemy, you really understand, really in essence, that's what it's all about. And we know the greatest alchemist, and we know the higher science of real spiritual alchemy has its origins in ancient Egypt. Because the pharaohs and the great deities and the cults of these great deities that formed, the triads of these great cults that formed their priesthoods, were built on understanding the higher sciences of the spiritual alchemy on all levels. And this spiritual alchemy is incorporated in your magical practices, because it's an important essence to understand, is to really tap into, work with, understand, and be able to master your subjective universe. So it's critical and it's key. I'm going to take some excerpts out of a book that I have mentioned in the past on previous videos a while back. The Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation by Dennis William Huck. This is a book that I encountered a few years back. And as I said before in previous videos, if you've been watching my channel for a while and saw some of the older videos, I did some pieces out of this book, some classes, and I've gotten some good topics out of this book. This book is another good solid groundwork to start out with. This in addition, because what this does is expound on what we know as the Emerald Tablets of Tahuti, and it gets a little bit more in depth on what that alchemical message was that was being conveyed in them tablets. That, in addition to the 7 principles of Tahuti, is a very, very, very concrete, solid work that could really get the mind moving in the right direction to really get, one, most importantly, to understand yourself and your role and scheme and things in the universes and multiverses, and 2, it really puts it in perspective when you start working higher forms of spiritual magic, how to really put it into perspective and understand it for self. Because a lot of this is mental, and you'll hear that in a lot of systems. So I'm going to start with the section in here on coagulation. And it goes on to say, before the final coagulation occurs in a person, that final change, he or she can appear to be arrogant or self-involved because of their preoccupation with finding perfection. This is important to understand. We're going to talk about this. Finding perfection and divinity within themselves. Afterwards, they exude a unique presence, a steady confidence in their daily activities, and others begin to see them as authentic and whole persons whom they want to emulate. People sense this higher presence and want to worship it, which sometimes results in the quasi-religious following we observed in the lives of people in the past, such as Balinas, Alexander. Modern examples include the Hindu gurus like Rama Maharshi and Paramashana and Yogananda, and mystics like any of these great mystical spiritual teachers that have come in the past. We're going to talk about that, and be careful of that trap. The alchemists used the astrological cipher for their constellation Gemini to denote coagulation, but also associated the characteristics of the water signs Pisces and Aquarius with this final process of alchemy. The divine twins of Gemini represented the alchemical rebus, with melding of opposites was also closely associated with Tahuti. The quest of the Gemini person is for endless variety. I can attest to this because I am a Gemini. Those born under this air sign are said to be full of life, mentally agile and responsive, versatile, and enjoy expressing themselves. but live primarily in the mind. And their free-flowing mercurial personality can bother some people. Yes, and I know I can bother some people. Then it gets into some people that are under that sign. I'm going to stop for a minute before I continue to talk about the beginning part of the coagulated person. I'm going to back up here. Before this final coagulation comes, it goes on to talk about an individual will go through a period where they can become arrogant or self-involved because of their preoccupation with finding perfection. So when you're on that quest, remember, nobody is perfect. We're all striving to be perfect. Because if anybody on this planet was 100% perfect and had no faults, we wouldn't even be having this. I wouldn't be wasting my time doing this video. And it applies to you, everybody listening. You wouldn't waste your time and energy studying. You're always trying to learn. People seek out knowledge and wisdom because they're trying to perfect themselves. It's an ongoing process that's never ending. Nobody is completely perfect. They're striving for perfection. Are there moments where you achieve levels of perfection? Of course there are. There are moments where you master things and you have perfected certain things on a certain level. But just as quick as those moments come, there's moments where you're knocked back down to reality and reminded of, exactly your place in the scheme of things. And that's when the challenges come. So what this is talking about here, as people are going through this coagulation or change, especially on this path, they're going to encounter them hardships. They're going to take on some of those characteristics where they can come off as a pompous jackass or unbearing or sometimes ignorant. Because what happens is when you start to go through this coagulation process and you really start, transforming in that alchemical change to becoming what you're destined to be or on that road to trying to perfect yourself, this is bullshit that comes your way. You go through it. The tests start flying left and right. The challenges start coming your way. I've likened this before in the past to when people come on this path. One thing that comes on this path, and I've said this many times before, is change. But the thing that's key in understanding, you have to make sure you're ready and prepared to accept that change. Most people will tell you on the surface they are, but I've found that not to be true. And I'm saying that also because I found myself, I'm speaking from experience, found myself sometimes not realizing the magnitude of that change and thought that I was prepared for it. So when I make that statement, I'm not making that statement saying that I was perfect when I went through it and I didn't have any problems. I'm saying it from experience that there was some shit that I was not prepared for. And not only did I see it in me, after the fact, years later, I still see other people having that same problem. I don't think anybody's ever fully prepared for the magnitude of the change that comes. They have a general idea on the surface. They know change is coming and they think, mentally they're prepared for all of it, and they're not. And that's the challenge, because when it does come and you realize, wow, this is intense, or this is more than I thought, now the challenge is, can you tap into your divinity, your God or goddess-like powers and qualities, and master that situation and overcome it? So, as I've said before on this path, the change is coming. Because you come on this path because, one, you recognize that there's more to life, there's more to the universe, there's more to creation, there's more to understanding life and death and the mysteries of life and death. You come on this path because everything you've studied and learned up until this point, it satisfied a need or a thirst or a quest for knowledge to a certain extent, but you realize that there's more out there. And you realize that you're willing to go whatever length you need to go to get that knowledge and get that wisdom, and you're willing to sacrifice. You're willing to do whatever it is you need to do to get to that point. Long story short, you realize there's a lot more out there, and this path opens the doors and gives you the answers to those questions. A lot of things that you thought were taboo or wrong, you come to realize they're not what you thought they were. A lot of things that you've been running from or avoiding, you start to face on this path, because as you come on this path and make that coagulation process or that transformation process, in that change, as I've said before, also things come to the surface that you have been avoiding or not addressing about yourself, your shortcomings, your weaknesses, your bad habits. You're forced, whether you want to or not, to make the change, because now that you know, and with that knowing and awareness is a responsibility, you're required now as a living, breathing, and talking God or goddess to make that change. Okay? And I don't think people understand the extent of that. And what I mean by that is, I found people come on this path wanting that change, wanting to grow, and it literally turned their lives upside down, from their careers to their relationships, to their circle of friends and social life. A lot of it, I'm not saying all, because some people were tapping into the good thing, and some of the stuff they did have around them in their life at that time, they maybe weren't utilizing it to their best of the ability. But for the most part, it's usually the opposite. Most people come to this path because at that time, there's not a lot of productive things going on in their life. Or let me rephrase that. There's not a lot of productive things around them that's going on in their life, okay? And they find out that maybe the circles that they've been running in for years and the company they've been keeping is the wrong company. Some people have come to the hardcore realization of the very person that they might have had children with, or got married, or whatever, was the wrong person. And they don't realize it till 3 or 4 children later. These are realities that you're faced with, because when you say you want to come on this path and you want to go through that coagulation or transformation process, you have to embrace everything that comes with it, not just what you like. Now, there'll be great, positive things also. The awareness and the knowledge and the wisdom will increase. You'll be more in tune spiritually on a multitude of levels. Those things come when one naturally studies and disciplines themselves and works this path. But that's not the hard stuff to deal with. The hard stuff to deal with is maybe facing something that you've been doing for so many years that you thought was the correct thing, and now all of a sudden, by really going within yourself and going through this self-transformation process, you had to swallow the hard pill that this thing I've been doing for so many years isn't really as productive or right as I thought it was. Those are the challenges. Now, the wise person will address it, deal with it, master it, and move forward and continue to grow. The weak person will find an excuse to take a step back and keep doing the same shit. You understand? And this is where the challenges come in. So coagulation. Now, again, this is why when we use Baphomet on this path, and that's why I've said on past videos, when people, this very simple here, when people see the pentagram or they see the head of Baphomet, they go again to all of the already preconceived definitions on the internet, and they're reading the wrong books from a religious person's interpretation, and it automatically gets connected with devil worship and Satanism, mainly European Satanism. And as I said and addressed in the past, this path has nothing to do with European Satanism. The Baphomet symbol and pentagram goes back way before modern day Satanists were using it. But just like every other religion, the European basically steals every symbol, every culture, and religion and grafts it to his or her own. And I'm not saying that in a racist sense, but what tends to happen is most people correlate it to the European definition of it when it predates that, is what I'm trying to say. This is where the misinformation comes in. So Baphomet, to an alchemist or a practitioner who's really on the left-hand path, doesn't, again, as I said before, does not worship Baphomet as a deity. And then I've gotten emails in the past, well, what about the Knights of Templar? They secretly worship Baphomet in their temples. Where did you get that from? Because you read it somewhere? You heard it on the internet? Somebody put it in a book. But can you 100% confirm that other than what you read or heard? And if there are Knights of Templars or mystic societies doing that, uplifting and holding Baphomet as some deity that they're worshiping, they're not real practitioners on the left-hand path. Okay? But all these conspiracy theories and spook stories that have been out there for hundreds and even longer years are out there for an intentional reason, to keep away certain people, to keep people in a state of blindness and dumbness and ignorance, Because anybody that's a real practitioner of the left-hand path, anybody that really studies spiritual alchemy, doesn't look at Baphomet like that, doesn't worship Baphomet. Baphomet is not Satan and the devil. Now, yes, as I said before, European Satanists have incorporated this symbol into their traditions because of their interpretation of it, okay, and their wrongful interpretation of it. So Baphomet is one of the most powerful alchemical symbols, because remember, a true alchemist can work with symbols and what they represent and what they actually stand for consciously. When I say stand for, because they all represent a certain aspect of consciousness. And again, I used the Baphomet symbol earlier in dealing with totality, balance, equilibrium, masculine and feminine energy, as above, so below, the elements, earth, wind, air, fire, water. All of these bring in and make up you. You are Baphomet. It's a symbolic, it's an alchemical symbol of being a god that's working in, a god or goddess, that's working in harmony with the universes. That's in tune on all levels. This is why it's one of the most popular alchemical symbols. And you can work, an alchemist in his magical practices can work with symbols in rituals, be it sigils, be it with literally drawing those sigils out, or actually visualizing them mentally in their head. Either method is powerful. Whatever works for the magician is going to be effective, because whatever he or she sees fit to produce and create the results that they're trying to obtain in that ritual, whatever methodology they get to come to that, that's entirely up to the adept or the magician. And this is key. So the spookism has to be eliminated. And again, you'll hear this over and over. Easier said than done. Unfortunately, it's not. And I've talked about this in the past, and something we were discussing on this past Thursday night's radio show. Is this path for people that are melanated? Blacks, Latinos, Asians, etc. Any ethnicity that falls in the melanated family. Is this a path for them? It most definitely is, but it's not a popular path, because it's a path that most melanated people are not familiar with, and a path that most melanated people are spooked out about it because they've been indoctrinated to something they belong to or something that they've studied. I myself, belonging to so many conscious movements, or belonging to a conscious move, or being in that conscious circle for so many years, I was always taught years back to stay away from all of this stuff. This is the shit that I was told, don't mess with. It's evil. It's devil worship. It's going to lead you down the wrong path. That couldn't be farthest thing from the truth. There's more peace, love, and harmony and real spirituality on this path than any other path. All of those other paths that talk about peace and love and coming together, I found out they're the biggest hypocrites, the biggest two-faced pieces of shit. It's all talk, and they'll be the quickest people to backstab you. There is no brotherhood and sisterhood and unity in any of them groups. It's an illusion on the surface. And as I said before, this path, there is, because it starts with self. And if self isn't right, that emanates out, and it shows in your personality and characteristics, and it creates that disconnect with everything or everybody else around you. But you will find some of the most sincere, dedicated, loyal, and most reliable people on this path, because it's no cut, no corners, no bullshit, straight to the point. And we lack that in a lot of our spiritual systems. It's always laid in a lot of fluffy shit that masks shit, or it's always laid out where it's set up where people can cover up their bullshit or hide from and run from their bullshit. So a lot of those things that I was told in the past about this path, I found out over the years now, has been a bunch of bullshit. And as I said before in past videos, you're going to find out everything that you've been told to stay away from are things you should have looked into a little bit more in depth. Because if somebody's telling you not to read something, study something, or deal with, they're telling you for a reason. And the reason that they're telling you that is because they know nothing about it. And they fear it, or they're scared of it because they've been indoctrinated. You understand? And the only person that can come to the conclusion if something is for them or not is you. Somebody else can't make that decision for you. You have to experience that. And we experience that known by something on this path called the doctrine of indulgence. And that's another unique thing on this path that's different from any other path. It doesn't discourage indulging in the physical world as some completely disagreeable, negative, or some evil thing you should never do. It encourages you to indulge to the point to experience and learn. And we don't do that on a lot of these other fluffy paths because there's so many different rules, regulations, and restrictions and do's and do nots. So one can never coagulate or transform and grow because there's always something or somebody over that growth dictating at what rate you can grow, how, and they determine when you can actually officially make that change or growth to the next level or step. And that's a bunch of bullshit. So the coagulated person, when he takes on that responsibility, he or she will find that they're going to encounter these obstacles, their moment of truth, their fork in the road. And how they respond is critical and key to how they're going to move forward as they continue down this path. Or they're going to take a step back and go back to doing the same crap that they were doing. So coagulation on this path is a powerful tool. It's just one has to lay out that plan to do it, okay? I'm going to continue on. All right. Let me skip down here. I'm going to skip some of this. I'm not going to get into all of this. Okay. All right, so let's back up here real quick. All right, fear. Let's talk a little bit about fear in this process and in this change, okay? Not just fear. Let's go a little bit more in depth in coagulation. All right, during coagulation, you must gain control of this vibrational state and start to crystallize the subtle energy into a stone, your truly independent second body. Now remember, the philosopher's stone is you. The individual in the alchemical terms that you're working on to perfect that philosopher's stone that you're trying to perfect, it also ties in. There's a lot of masonry also encoded in this, because remember, as I've mentioned before, I believe on videos a while back, when one steps into a Masonic lodge, when you look in the east, you see two stones on both sides of the lodge, one on the left, one on the right. Those stones, one is a very rough ashlar stone that has a lot of imperfection and is very rough, and the stone on the right is very smooth. This is alchemical concepts and principles incorporated into masonry. And it says one comes into the Masonic lodge as a rough ashlar, a rough stone, meaning one comes in at first with a lot of imperfections, things they need to work on, things they need to fix about themselves. Sound familiar? So you could even find this process in masonry. And I'm telling you this because I am a master mason and walked through the Masonic lodge. I'm not telling you this just because I read it somewhere in a book. Okay? And on the right, you have the smooth ashlar, which is going to be a representation of you when you go through the blue lodge and are raised up as a master mason. You go from being a rough ashlar to a perfected and smooth ashlar. You understand? So the temple, the stone that you're working on, the stone, as it says in the Bible, the stone that the builders rejected in the temple, all this is symbolic to the work that needs to be done on you. You come in with rough things you have to fix about yourself, imperfections, but the goal is to become perfected. So when it's talking about here during coagulation, you must begin to create a vibrational rate that is necessary to touch or connect with your, it uses the word second body, okay? Now, there's a part of this transformation that gets into astral traveling, which I'm not going to get into right now. But when it uses the term second body, it's talking about, in order for you to tap into your second body, this is your real self. When one is not confounded anymore, because part of tapping into this coagulation or change, one starts to experience things outside of person, place, or thing. And I've talked about this at periods of time over the years. when one is not confounded to three-dimensional things, and one starts to experience the inner alchemy of their mind, they now start to tap into a different awareness, a different level of knowledge. You could call it your second body when you astral travel. Some use this term on a multitude of levels, but we're using it on the surface. Your second body is your true self. Because a real alchemist knows, in order to tap into the essence of them true selves, we know this physical composure that we see, the reflection we see in the mirror when we look at ourselves every day, is just us vibrating at a low frequency. So we take on the appearance of a solid image. We know when we vibrate at a higher frequency and we make ourselves less dense, we start to evolve back into who and what we really are. The term mentioned earlier about making oneself less dense, and I talked about this, I believe last week or the week before. What that basically means is disciplining yourself not to be controlled by your emotions. This is the first step to this coagulation process. All right. So what I want to finish with, I want to get into some of the basics. What are some of the steps to this process and getting on that road to making that transformation and change? Let's talk about the most important things. So let's start with the beginning phases. We'll finish with this over the next couple of minutes. It starts real simple. First and foremost, analyzing your life. Okay? It starts with the physical first, because once you start to change your immediate environment and surroundings, that has a reflection on the mental, and once the mind or the mental state is at its correct form or capacity, then you start tapping into higher levels of spirituality. And that's when the coagulation process really starts to begin. So step one must look at themselves first and identify things about themselves that they need to work on and correct. Analyze your surroundings, your circle of friends, things you're doing in your life, your career, your family, and see what's good and what might need correction. So you're taking a full stock of your environment and your surroundings. These are the beginning steps and stages. And then when one has to now understand and recognize is, okay, if you're hanging out or you're running in social circles of a bunch of derelicts, whether you like it or not, you're going to become a derelict. It's just a matter of time. You are the company you keep, if you've ever heard that saying. That's something my mother would say to me all the time when I was younger. And if I ever rolled with any knuckleheads or brought them around to the house and she sensed that they were knuckleheads, she would tell me, you are the company you keep. So you can sit here and say, oh, I'm not a knucklehead. But if you're keeping the company of knuckleheads, you will. That energy starts to wear off on you. So it starts with step one. About the steps one needs to take is about changing certain things that's going on around them in their life. If you've been working at stuff for a long period of time, let's start with knowledge, information, spirituality, and how this also connects to the physical. If, as I've said before in the past, if you've been studying some type of spiritual practice or dogma for years, and you can't do a serious gauge on it and look from when you first came in up until the present and really see that dramatical change and the constant, consistent change, if you can't lay claim to that, then you need to really adjust what it is you're studying and doing, because what you put into the mind, information that you study, information that you keep feeding your mind affects the subconscious, and therefore, if it's unproductive, it's going to make you unproductive on all levels because you keep ingesting this unproductive shit. So if you belong to some group, organization, or spiritual system, and you really can't see a consistent change, you don't really see things growing. I'm not talking about just basic mundane stuff. I'm talking about you should be transforming on all levels. If you're not seeing that consistently, you might want to analyze your spiritual practices, because this can be a huge downfall. Just because you've been doing something for so long, as I said before, or you're loyal to something for so long, that doesn't make it right. And sometimes our loyalty keeps us in a state of mental bondage because we can't break free from the mental bonds of something that's been chaining us that we're not fully conscious of. So these are the battles that one faces when they go through stages of coagulation or transformation. So this is hard. I mean, look, It's easy to see some of it. Sometimes it might even be easy to point out, but it's definitely more challenging to address and to fix. So one has to go through that process first, and then when one has identified these things, then one now puts a plan in to make change. By changing these things, by putting another system in place that replaces it, that's going to be beneficial for the adept. And that might be, and I can tell you this again from experience, the circle of people or friends that I deal with, and my circle is I keep it very small because I choose it that way, and I've just found the less people you keep in that circle, the less problems. I'm not interested at any more in this point in my life of belonging to a big circle because it's more nonsense and confusion to me. But I will say this, I myself probably don't deal with anybody that I dealt with several years ago because I found out that the circle that I was rolling in was very unproductive, that it was very unsuccessful people. It was just a bunch of daydreamers that would talk a bunch of nonsense and shit and never carry it out. For the most part, failures on all levels, financially, mentally, family-wise, career-wise. I'm saying most. I'm not saying all. I'm just saying in general. So I found out I was caught in that rut. Not that I was doing terrible, but I always felt back then, years back, that I was in a rut, that there was just no growth. Like I was at a standstill. I wasn't really going backwards, but I wasn't really going forward. So always trying to attribute it first to the spiritual in this coagulation process. It starts basic with the physical. I started to realize it was the circle of friends, the company I was keeping, the things that I was involved in were not productive. So I had to make that change. No matter how long I was doing it, or how accustomed I got to it, or how loyal I had to shed all that shit. As soon as I did that, this is when the coagulation or the transformation process went through the roof. It was a certain sense of personal freedom, personal freedom in the sense that whatever restrictions that I had laid upon myself, knowingly or unknowingly, were now removed. The universe was opened up to me, and there was no limitations. The only thing that was going to limit me or hold me back was myself. And what that power and what that, responsibility, comes, being responsible. It's not a power, or it's not a gift that one should abuse. It's the best way I can put it. So these are the steps one must take, the beginning steps of coagulation or transformation. Working that mental alchemy of the inner mind. I'm kind of going to leave it there. I'm not going to go too much more on this topic, so you can kind of ingest. But I'm gonna focus on moving forward. I want people to understand the spiritual aspects of this path, because some, I don't think really do. They have, again, misconceptions of this path, that there's no spirituality on it. We'll get into some meditation, astral traveling, some of these techniques that are keys to developing, your transformational process or change, because all of this is involved on this path. Alchemy is probably one of the most, things that I utilize in my everyday spiritual practices, and it's another practice that goes back to ancient Egypt. Real alchemy goes back to ancient Egypt, and everything that I was talking about when you read comes from the Emerald Tablets of Tahuti. And one thing I've always had a problem with in this whole Kemetic conscious circle, it's just, as I said, it's over talking too much history. And again, I don't say that because history is not important. You must know your past to know your future. You should know your history, but you shouldn't get stuck in that past and that history. And the problem I see with a lot of our brothers and sisters, they just want to sit there and get caught of how great they back in the day and back then, back this and back then. And as I said before, that's completely useless to me in 2017, because that's not going to make me a successful person. So we must know our past, but not get caught in the past. And a lot of us get caught in the past. So I have a problem when people don't talk everything that I'm talking about, or everything that I talk about in my videos, whether you are at that realization or not, you will see has its origins in ancient Egypt. It's just not talked about because it's not a popular path. Black magic, the black arts, Heka as it's called in ancient Egypt, spiritual alchemy, this is the beauty and the glory and the power of ancient Egypt. And if we utilize these sciences on a daily basis, we would be able to bring about that change we're looking for. First individually, and once we're all individually got ourselves corrected, collectively and mentally, we would actually unite. We're living in a day and time where it's getting rough out here. There's so much shit going on in the news, so much junk that they're feeding through the media to mess with your mind. I mean, the world is in an uproar right now. You got all these actors and politicians now coming to light with this molestation accusations. It's going to get worse. You got the state of politics and the world unstable right now, where everybody's panicky, especially Korea and the United States, where we're a button away from starting another major world war. The planet is going through severe changes because what's happening, we are a reflection consciously of what we carry out. So the planet is changing, but what's happening is most people collectively are not changing with nature and the planet. And I say that because if you don't change or make that transition, because remember, we talked in the past about microcosm and macrocosm. We are a reflection. One is the reflection of the other. And as I said before, when we talk about all these natural disasters and cataclysmic events on a video I did back after the hurricanes, we are the ones responsible for what's going on. We are the ones causing this destruction. And we have to stop blaming external things. I don't care what system of spirituality you belong to. We got to stop blaming it on the devil, and we got to stop blaming it on this, that person, and this group, and that. We allow this to happen. We opened ourselves up to it. The question is now how you're going to bring about the change. Well, step one is the things that we're talking about here today. This must happen. It's not an if. This must happen because no matter where you run to and what you try to identify with to cover up shit that you're dealing with and not addressing, you're just suppressing it, and it's going to make it stronger. With resistance comes persistence. So the more you resist to address this shit, it becomes stronger. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it comes to the surface. And sometimes by then it might be way too much for you to handle. So anyway, I hope that kind of, connects that. We're going to get into a little more alchemy. I'm probably going to try to stay on this. I mean, sometimes things change, don't. But I want people to understand the mental power and aspect of this. And I'm probably going to revisit some of these 7 principles of Tahuti because I think that needs to be revisited. And that's something that I study frequently. And it's a beautiful thing once you really understand it and how it works. Again, that's all I have for this video. But again, real quick, in the announcements I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'll be doing a class on Saturday, December 23rd in Miami Gardens, 7 p.m. And we will be doing our next group ritual January 27th, 2018 at Cultural Expressions in Hollywood, Florida. Those flyers should be done in the next couple of days, and I will get those flyers out. If you are interested in getting that information, or you are interested in getting a spiritual consultation with myself, you can email me to set up an appointment, or you can email me to request information for the events I just mentioned at khnum19@gmail.com. All right, appreciate everybody tuning in, and peace.